The static crackled through the ancient Motorola radio at 3:47 a.m., but it wasn't random interference. Hidden beneath the white noise was a pattern, a deliberate sequence that would expose the most dangerous secret in Fort Brazelton's history. Maya Chun had spent 3 years in the basement repair shop, fixing broken military radios that nobody else wanted to touch. She thought she was just good with electronics. She had no idea she was about to uncover a betrayal that reached the highest levels of command. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights in sublevel B flickered with their usual sickly rhythm as Maya Chun adjusted her magnifying glass over the dismantled radio chassis. The serial number read RT4471, property of the 82nd Communications Battalion, and like most of the equipment that ended up on her workbench, it had seen better decades. The transistors were corroded, the antenna connector was loose, and someone had apparently tried to fix it with electrical tape, and prayer. Maya preferred it this way. Down here in the bowels of Fort Brazelton, 3 levels beneath the main communications center, she could work in peace. No officers breathing down her neck, no deadlines screaming at her from superiors' mouths. Just her, a soldering iron, and radios that had given up on life. At 26, she had already earned a reputation as the woman who could resurrect electronics that even the manufacturer had written off. The radio on her bench had arrived that morning with a work order signed by Colonel Patricia Hendricks. Herself, priority repair, communication breakdown during Operation Sandstorm drill. Maya had raised an eyebrow at that. The 82nd had been running those desert simulation exercises for months now, preparing for deployment to some classified location that everyone whispered about, but no one officially acknowledged. She powered on her spectrum analyzer and connected the radio's antenna port. The device immediately began displaying a waterfall of frequencies, each colored line representing a different signal dancing through the electromagnetic spectrum. This was Maya's favorite part of any repair, the detective work. Every broken radio told a story through its frequency response, its voltage patterns, its dying gasps of electronic life. But something was wrong with this particular story. The radio was receiving signals on frequencies that it shouldn't even be able to detect. Military radios were designed with specific bandwidth limitations, encrypted channels that operated within narrow, secure parameters. This RT4471, however, was picking up transmissions across a broad spectrum that included civilian emergency services, air traffic control, and something else, something that made Maya's skin crawl. She grabbed her notebook and began documenting the anomalous frequencies. 142.375 megahertz was pulling in local police dispatch. 121.5 megahertz was clearly an aircraft emergency frequency. But 156.8 megahertz was broadcasting something that sounded like coded transmissions in a language she couldn't identify. The signals were strong, too strong to be an accidental bleed-through from nearby towers. Maya had been fixing military radio since graduating from Georgia Tech with her electrical engineering degree. She understood the intricate dance between circuits, the careful balance of resistors and capacitors that made communication possible across vast distances. But she had never encountered modifications like these. Someone had deliberately altered this radio's internal circuitry. The modifications were subtle, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. A resistor here had been replaced with one of slightly different value. A capacitor there had been swapped for a higher tolerance component. To most repair technicians, these would look like standard replacement parts. But Maya noticed that each alteration expanded the radio's receiving capabilities, turning what should have been a secure military communication device into something that could eavesdrop on practically any frequency in the region. She photographed every modification with her phone, careful to capture the part numbers and their positions within the circuit board. This wasn't random tampering, this was professional work, done by someone with intimate knowledge of military radio, specifications and access to specialized components. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she continued her analysis. In her 3 years of repair work, she had maintained perfect operational security. She never discussed her work outside the facility, never took home classified materials, never even mentioned specific radio models to her civilian friends. The military had trained that discretion into her bones during her security clearance process, but this felt different. This felt dangerous. The radio began emitting a soft whining sound as she adjusted the frequency dial. She quickly turned down the volume and checked the signal strength meter. Something was actively transmitting on 167.4 megahertz, a frequency that shouldn't have any authorized users in this geographic area. Maya hesitated for a moment, then slowly increased the volume. What she heard changed everything. The transmission was encrypted, but not with standard military encryption protocols. This was something else entirely, a rolling cipher that seemed to shift its pattern every 30 seconds. Through her headphones, it sounded like digital noise punctuated by brief moments of clear audio. In those moments, she caught fragments of English words mixed with what sounded like Russian phrases. Maya's blood ran cold. Fort Brazelton was currently hosting a joint training exercise with several NATO allies, but Russia was decidedly not among them. The base's security protocols were explicit about monitoring for foreign intelligence gathering, and what she was hearing sounded exactly like the kind of transmission that would trigger a counterintelligence investigation. She reached for the secure phone on her desk, ready to call this into base security, when she heard something that made her freeze. A voice was speaking clearly through the static, and she recognized it immediately. Colonel Patricia Hendricks, the same officer whose signature was on the work order for this radio, was discussing troop movements and operational timelines with someone who kept responding in accented English. Maya yanked off her headphones and stared at the radio as if it had transformed into a venomous snake. Colonel Hendricks was scheduled to deploy with the 82nd in less than 2 weeks. She had clearance for operational details that enemy intelligence would pay fortunes to obtain. And here she was, broadcasting those details through a modified radio that could be monitored by anyone with the right equipment. The implications crashed over Maya like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about a broken radio anymore. This was about treason at the highest levels of Fort Brazelton's command structure. Someone had been using modified radios to communicate with foreign agents, and that someone had access to classified deployment information. Maya's repair shop suddenly felt like the most dangerous place on Earth. She was alone, 3 levels underground, holding evidence of what appeared to be an ongoing espionage operation. The same operation that involved an officer who had the authority to assign her this specific radio for repair. Had Colonel Hendricks deliberately sent this radio to Maya, knowing it would reveal the communication channel? Was this some kind of test, or worse, was Maya being set up to take the fall for someone else's treason? The radio crackled again, and Maya heard her own name mentioned in the encrypted transmission. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she realized that whoever was on the other end of that signal knew exactly who was listening. She was no longer just fixing a broken radio. She had stumbled into the middle of something that could get her killed. Maya's finger hovered over the secure phone's handset, her mind racing through scenarios that all seemed to end with her disappearing into military detention. The transmission had gone silent, but the radio's LED indicator still glowed amber, meaning the channel remained active. Someone was still listening. She forced herself to breathe slowly and think like an engineer. Evidence first, assumption second. Maya disconnected the radio from her test equipment and carefully began documenting every modification she'd discovered. Each altered component got photographed from multiple angles, with detailed notes about the changes and their probable functions. If she was going to survive this, she needed irrefutable proof of what she'd found. The basement repair shop had security cameras in each corner, but Maya knew from experience that they were more for show than function. The feeds went to a monitoring station on level 1 that was staffed by rotating guards, who spent most of their shifts playing cards or scrolling through their phones. Still, she positioned herself to block the camera's view as she worked. 20 minutes later, Maya had completed her documentation. The modified radio wasn't just capable of receiving unauthorized frequencies, it had been transformed into a sophisticated intelligence-gathering device. Someone with extensive knowledge of military communication protocols had systematically upgraded its capabilities while maintaining the appearance of a standard field radio, but who had access to perform these modifications? And more importantly, how many other radios in the base inventory had been similarly altered? Maya pulled up the repair log database on her computer terminal. The system tracked every piece of communication equipment on Fort Brazelton, including maintenance history, current location, and assigned personnel. If there was a pattern to the modifications, the database would reveal it. She started with radios assigned to the 82nd Communications Battalion and began cross-referencing repair orders from the past 6 months. What she found made her stomach drop. 17 different radios from various units had been sent to her shop for routine maintenance or performance optimization. Each work order had been signed by officers from different departments, but when Maya looked at the actual repair work performed, she noticed a troubling pattern. None of these radios had actually been broken. Every single unit had arrived in perfect working condition, requiring only minor adjustments that any field technician could have performed. Yet they'd been specifically routed to Maya's isolated repair facility, where she worked alone and rarely interacted with other personnel. Someone had been using her shop as a cover for the modification operation, counting on her reputation for discretion and her location in the basement where visitors were rare. Maya felt sick as she realized how thoroughly she'd been manipulated. Her skills and her isolation had made her the perfect unwitting accomplice. While she thought she was performing routine maintenance, someone else had been accessing these radios to install surveillance equipment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But that raised another terrifying question. If Maya wasn't performing the modifications herself, who was? She scrolled through the access logs for her repair shop. The electronic lock system recorded every entry and exit, along with the identification badges used. During normal business hours, Maya's badge showed regular activity. But there were other entries, logged during evening hours when she wasn't supposed to be working. The badge numbers belonged to maintenance personnel. But when Maya looked up their profiles, she found inconsistencies that made her blood run cold. Staff Sergeant Robert Kelman had supposedly accessed her shop 12 times in the past month, but according to the personnel database, Kelman had been deployed to Kuwait since March. Technical specialist Amanda Rodriguez had logged 17 visits, but her security clearance had been revoked in January following a failed polygraph examination. Someone was using fabricated identities and cloned access badges to enter her shop after hours. The modification work was happening right under her nose, in her own workspace, while she slept in her barracks 3 levels above. Maya's hands shook as she closed the database and tried to process what she'd discovered. This wasn't just about Colonel Hendricks communicating with foreign agents. This was about a sophisticated espionage network that had infiltrated Fort Brazelton's communication infrastructure. They were using her repair shop as their base of operations, and they'd been doing it for months. The radio on her workbench suddenly crackled back to life. Maya froze as she heard voices speaking in rapid, urgent tones. The encryption had shifted to a different pattern, but fragments were still audible. She caught references to the engineer and compromised operation before the signal faded. Back into static dot, they knew she'd been listening. They knew she'd discovered their modifications. And now they were discussing what to do about her. Maya grabbed her documentation photos and notes, shoving everything into her laptop bag along with her personal tools. She needed to get out of the basement immediately and find someone she could trust with this information. But as she reached for the door handle, she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy boots, moving with military precision, approaching. Her shop, Maya counted at least 3 sets of footsteps, possibly 4. They weren't trying to be quiet. She looked around her shop desperately for another exit, but the basement level had been designed with security in mind. Each room had only one entrance, and the emergency exits required special authorization codes that Maya didn't possess. She was trapped. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Maya heard the soft beep of an access badge being scanned, followed by the mechanical click of the lock disengaging. She dove behind her workbench and crouched in the narrow space between it and the wall. Clutching her laptop bag against her chest. The door opened and 3 figures entered. Maya couldn't see their faces from her hiding position, but she recognized the voice of the first person who spoke. "She's not here," said Major Dennis Crawford, the base's deputy communications officer. "But look at this mess." Maya's heart hammered as she realized that Major Crawford was examining her workbench, where she'd left the modified radio and her test equipment connected. He would immediately understand what she'd been doing. "The radio's been completely disassembled," said a second voice that Maya didn't recognize. "She found the modifications. How much does she know?" asked a third person with a slight accent that might have been Eastern European. Major Crawford picked up Maya's notebook from the workbench. She'd forgotten about it in her panic, and it contained detailed technical drawings of every modification she'd discovered. "She knows everything," Crawford said grimly. "Look at these notes. She's documented the frequency expansions, the encryption bypass circuits, even the power amplification modifications. This is professional-level analysis." Maya pressed herself against the concrete wall, trying to make herself invisible. Through a gap in her workbench's lower shelf, she could see Major Crawford's boots as he moved around the room. He was searching systematically, checking every corner where someone might hide. "The question is whether she's already reported this to security," said the accented voice. "If she has, we need to activate the emergency protocols immediately." "She hasn't reported it yet," Crawford replied with certainty. "I monitor all communications to and from this facility. No security alerts have been triggered, and her access logs show she's been down here alone for the past 4 hours. But that doesn't mean we have much time." Maya realized that Major Crawford's position gave him oversight of the base's communication systems. He would know about every call, every email, every message sent through official channels. The espionage network wasn't just using her repair shop. It was being coordinated by someone with administrative access to Fort Brazelton's entire communication infrastructure. "What's our exposure level?" asked the second voice. "Significant," Crawford admitted. "She's identified 17 compromised radios across 6 different units. If she talks to the right person, they could trace the entire network within hours. We've got assets embedded at battalion level and above, but once counterintelligence gets involved, even our high-level protection won't matter." Maya's mind reeled as she processed what she was hearing. This wasn't just about a few modified radios. The espionage network had infiltrated multiple levels of Fort Brazelton's command structure. They had people in positions of authority who could protect the operation from routine security scrutiny. But now Maya had stumbled into their system, and her technical expertise had allowed her to map their entire infrastructure in a single evening. She'd become an existential threat to an operation that had probably taken years to establish. "We need to find Chun and contain this situation," said the accented voice. "The operation is too valuable to abandon because of one curious engineer." Crawford's boots moved closer to Maya's hiding spot, She's here somewhere. Her badge shows. She entered the building 6 hours ago, but there's no exit scan. Either she's still in the building, or she knows how to bypass the security system. Maya held her breath as Crawford's footsteps stopped just inches from her workbench. If he looked down, he would see her immediately. Her laptop bag felt impossibly heavy in her arms, filled with the evidence that could destroy their entire network. "Check the other rooms on this level," Crawford ordered. "She might be hiding in one of the storage areas. And remember, we need her alive. Dead engineers ask questions that we can't answer." The footsteps moved away from Maya's position and toward the door. She heard them exit into the corridor, their voices fading as they searched the adjacent rooms. But Maya knew they would be back. Crawford was methodical, and he wouldn't leave until he'd searched every possible hiding place. Maya waited until she could no longer hear their voices, then carefully emerged from behind the workbench. Her legs had gone numb from crouching, and she nearly stumbled as she stood up. The room felt different, now contaminated by the knowledge of what it had really been used for. She needed to get out of the basement, but the main corridor would take her directly past the areas where Crawford and his team were searching. Maya looked around the room, desperately trying to remember the building's layout. Fort Brazelton had been constructed in the 1960s, and like many military facilities from that era, it had been designed with redundant systems and emergency passages. Then she remembered the maintenance tunnels. During her first week at the facility, Maya had noticed a small access panel in the corner of her shop. It led to the utility tunnels that housed the building's electrical and communications cables. The passages were narrow and uncomfortable, but they connected to similar access points throughout the basement level. Maya grabbed her laptop bag and approached the access panel. It was secured with a simple latch, designed to allow maintenance workers easy access to the cable runs. She opened it carefully, trying not to make any noise that might alert Crawford's team to her escape route. The tunnel was exactly as cramped as she'd expected, barely wide enough for her shoulders and low enough that she had to crawl on her hands and knees. But it led away from her shop and toward the building's main electrical room, which had its own separate exit to the surface. As Maya crawled through the darkness, dragging her laptop bag behind her, she tried to plan her next move. She needed to get off the base and contact someone with the authority to investigate what she'd discovered. But who could she trust? Crawford's comments suggested that the espionage network had assets at multiple levels of command. Maya emerged from the maintenance tunnel into the electrical room 15 minutes later, covered in dust and cable debris. The room was dimly lit by emergency lighting, and the constant hum of electrical equipment masked any sound she might make. More importantly, it had a separate exit that led directly to a parking area behind the building. She checked her watch. 4:23 a.m. The base would be transitioning to morning shift soon, which meant increased foot traffic and security patrols. If Maya was going to escape without being detected, she needed to move quickly. But as she reached for the exit door, Maya heard something that made her freeze. Her phone was buzzing with an incoming text message. The sender was listed as base security, but the message itself made her blood run cold. Maya-chan, report to Building 7, Room 301 immediately for a security briefing. This is not optional. Someone knew exactly where she was and what she'd discovered. The network was closing in. Maya stared at the text message, her hands trembling as the implication sank in. Building 7 was the counterintelligence facility. Room 301 was where suspected security breaches were investigated. Either genuine base security had discovered her unauthorized investigation, or the espionage network was using official channels to lure her into a trap. She deleted the message and turned off her phone completely. If they could track her location through cell towers, removing the battery was her only option. Maya pulled apart the device with practiced efficiency, separating the battery from the main unit and wrapping both components in the anti-static cloth from her repair kit. The electrical room's exit led to a service road behind the communications building. Dawn was still an hour away, but Maya could see the first hint of gray light creeping over the eastern horizon. She needed to reach her car in the main parking lot, but crossing open ground would expose her to the security cameras that monitored every approach to the building. Maya remembered the storm drainage system that ran beneath the parking areas. During heavy rains, the concrete channels carried runoff from the base's buildings to retention ponds on the facility's perimeter. The channels were large enough for a person to move through, and they would provide cover from aerial surveillance. She found the nearest storm drain access and pried off the heavy metal grating with a screwdriver from her toolkit. The concrete channel was damp and smelled of stagnant water, but it offered a direct route to the parking area. Maya lowered herself into the drain and began moving toward her destination, using her phone's flashlight to navigate through the darkness. 20 minutes later, she emerged near the visitor parking section, 300 yards from where she'd left her Honda Civic. The base was beginning to show signs of early morning activity, lights coming on in the barracks buildings, the distant sound of PT formations beginning their daily runs. Maya used the increased activity as cover, moving from one parked vehicle to another until she reached her car. As she started the engine, Maya caught sight of movement in her rearview mirror. A black SUV with government plates was entering the parking lot, moving slowly as if the occupants were searching for something. Maya recognized the vehicle type. It was identical to the ones used by base security for investigations and arrests. She reversed out of her parking space and headed toward the main gate, forcing herself to drive at normal speed despite every instinct screaming at her to flee. The security checkpoint was manned by 2 military police officers, whom Maya recognized from her daily commute. Sergeant Torres waved her through with his usual friendly nod, apparently unaware that she was now considered a security risk. Maya drove off the base and onto Highway 401, heading toward the city of Millbrook, 15 miles away. She needed to find someone with the authority to investigate what she'd discovered. But Crawford's revelation that the espionage network had infiltrated multiple levels of command made that decision incredibly dangerous. Contacting the wrong person could result in her disappearance or worse. As she drove, Maya mentally cataloged her options. The FBI had a resident agency in Millbrook, but military counterintelligence cases fell under different jurisdictions. The Defense Criminal Investigative Service handled major security breaches, but Maya had no idea how to contact them directly. Congressional oversight committees had authority over military operations, but reaching a senator or representative as a low-level technician seemed impossible. Then Maya remembered Professor Elizabeth Morrison. Dr. Morrison had been Maya's faculty advisor at Georgia Tech and had maintained contact with her former students who went into defense contracting and military service. More importantly, Morrison had previously worked for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency and maintained security clearances that would give her credibility with federal investigators. Maya pulled into a gas station in Millbrook and used the payphone outside the convenience store. The ancient device accepted quarters and provided the anonymity that cellular communication couldn't offer. She dialed the number from memory, hoping that her former professor would answer despite the early hour. Elizabeth Morrison speaking. The voice was crisp and alert, suggesting that Dr. Morrison was already awake despite the 5:30 a.m. call time. Professor Morrison, this is Maya Chun. I graduated from your program 3 years ago, and I'm currently Maya. Of course I remember. You're working at Fort Brazelton now, aren't you? How are things going with the military electronics work? Maya felt a wave of relief at the familiar, trustworthy voice. Professor, I need to talk to you about something extremely sensitive. I've discovered what I believe is an active espionage operation involving multiple levels of military command. I have technical evidence, but I don't know who I can trust with this information. There was a long pause on the line. When Dr. Morrison spoke again, her voice had shifted to a more serious tone. Maya, that's an extremely serious allegation. Are you absolutely certain about what you found? I've documented systematic modifications to military communication equipment that allow unauthorized intelligence gathering. I've recorded transmissions between a base colonel and what sounds like foreign agents. And I've discovered that someone has been using my repair facility as a cover for installing surveillance equipment. Where are you calling from? A payphone. In Millbrook. I had to leave the base because I believe I'm in immediate danger. The people involved know that I've discovered their operation. Dr. Morrison was quiet for several seconds, apparently thinking through the implications. Maya, I'm going to give you an address. I want you to drive there immediately and wait for me. Don't contact anyone else, don't use your credit cards, and don't return to your apartment or any location where you might be expected. Can you do that? Maya wrote down the address on a napkin from the gas station. It was a location in downtown Millbrook that she didn't recognize. Professor, how do I know I can trust you with this? How do I know you're not part of whatever network I've stumbled into? You don't, Morrison replied honestly. But Maya, if what you've told me is accurate, you're in more danger than you realize. Military espionage operations don't leave loose ends. You need help from someone with the connections to investigate this properly, and right now, I'm the best option you have. Maya looked around the gas station parking lot, suddenly aware of how exposed she was. A white panel van had pulled up to the pumps while she'd been talking, and the driver seemed to be paying more attention to her than to refueling his vehicle. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Maya said, and hung up the phone. The address Dr. Morrison had provided turned out to be a small office building in Millbrook's historic district. The directory in the lobby listed various professional services lawyers, accountants, consultants, but nothing that seemed connected to defense or intelligence work. Maya found the suite number and knocked on the door. Dr. Morrison opened it immediately, as if she'd been waiting just inside. Maya's former professor looked exactly as she remembered: short gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of intense focus that had made her legendary among Georgia Tech's engineering students. "Come in quickly," Morrison said, ushering Maya into a small office furnished with basic furniture and very little decoration. "We don't have much time." "What is this place?" Maya asked, looking around the nondescript space. "A safe house, essentially. I maintain it for situations that require privacy from both government and private surveillance." Morrison gestured for Maya to sit down. "Now, show me what you found." Maya opened her laptop and began displaying the photographs and documentation she'd collected. Morrison examined each image carefully, asking technical questions about the circuit modifications and their probable functions. Her background in defense electronics was evident. She immediately grasped the sophisticated nature of the alterations. "This is professional work," Morrison said grimly. "These modifications weren't performed by opportunistic soldiers looking to make money selling classified information. This is systematic intelligence gathering by a foreign service with extensive knowledge of American military communication protocols." "How extensive is this operation?" Maya asked. Morrison pulled out a secure tablet and began typing rapidly. "Based on what you've shown me, I'd estimate this network has been in place for at least 2 years, possibly longer. The level of access required to modify this many radios without detection suggests they have assets at multiple levels of military command." Maya watched as Morrison accessed databases and communication systems that she didn't recognize. Whatever her former professor's current role, it clearly involved intelligence work at levels far above academic research. "Professor, who exactly are you working for now?" Morrison looked up from her tablet. "Officially, I'm a consultant for the Defense Intelligence Agency." Unofficially, I coordinate with various agencies when cases cross jurisdictional boundaries. Your discovery definitely qualifies. A soft chime from Morrison's tablet interrupted their conversation. She read the message that had appeared on her screen, and Maya saw her expression change to one of urgent concern. Maya, we have a problem. I just received an alert that you're currently listed as a WO from Fort Brazelton. There's also an active security bulletin describing you as a person of interest in a potential espionage investigation. Maya felt the room spinning around her. They're framing me. They're making it look like I'm the spy. It's a standard tactic, Morrison explained. If someone discovers an ongoing operation, you discredit them by making them appear to be part of the conspiracy they've exposed. By the time the investigation sorts out the truth, the real operatives have had time to eliminate evidence and extract their assets. Morrison's tablet chimed again, this time with what appeared to be an urgent priority message. She read it quickly and stood up abruptly. We need to leave immediately. There's a federal task force being assembled to investigate the espionage allegations at Fort Brazelton, but they're starting with the assumption that you're the primary suspect. If they find you here, you'll be arrested before you can present your evidence. Where can we go? Maya asked, grabbing her laptop bag. There's someone I need you to meet. Someone with the authority to hear your story and the power to act on it immediately. Morrison headed for the door. But Maya, once we take this step, there's no going back. You'll be placing your life in the hands of people you've never met, trusting them to distinguish between the real conspiracy and the cover story that's being constructed around you. Maya thought about Colonel Hendricks, Major Crawford, and the sophisticated network that had been operating under her nose for months. She thought about the modified radios, the encrypted transmissions, and the professional surveillance operation that had used her own repair shop as its base of operations. I don't have a choice, Maya said. If I don't expose this network, how many more classified operations will be compromised? How many soldiers will be put at risk because enemy agents know their deployment plans? Morrison nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking that will convince the right people to listen to you. But Maya, from this point forward, assumes that everyone is potentially compromised until proven otherwise. The network you've discovered has been in place long enough to establish assets in places we might not expect. They left the safe house through a rear exit that opened onto an alley behind the building. Morrison led Maya to a nondescript sedan parked between two dumpsters, the kind of vehicle that would be invisible in traffic. As they drove out of Millbrook, Maya asked the question that had been troubling her since she'd first heard the encrypted transmissions. Professor, how did they know to use my repair shop? Out of all the facilities on the base, why did they choose the one place where someone with my technical background would eventually notice the modifications? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, navigating through suburban traffic as she considered the question. That's what worries me most about this case, she finally said. Professional intelligence operations don't make mistakes like that. If they chose your facility specifically, it means they had a reason. Either they wanted the modifications to be discovered, or what? Or they have so much confidence in their ability to control the investigation that they weren't worried about being exposed. Maya stared out the window at the passing landscape, realizing that her discovery of the espionage network might have been part of someone's larger plan all along. The safe house was located in an abandoned industrial complex outside Richmond, 3 hours from Fort Brazelton. Morrison had driven through increasingly remote terrain, taking back roads and changing vehicles twice at locations that seemed predetermined. Maya began to understand that her former professor operated within a network far more sophisticated than academic consulting. The building they entered looked like a derelict warehouse from the outside, but the interior had been transformed into a high-tech operations center. Banks of computer monitors lined the walls, displaying real-time intelligence feeds from sources Maya couldn't identify. Communication equipment that made Fort Brazelton systems look primitive filled multiple workstations. "Welcome to Task Force, Blackwater," Morrison said as they entered the main operations room. "Officially, we don't exist. Unofficially, we investigate intelligence threats that cross traditional agency boundaries." Maya found herself facing three individuals who radiated the kind of professional competence that came from years of high-stakes intelligence work. Morrison made quick introductions. "This is Director Sarah Blackwood, formerly NS, a counterintelligence. Marcus Webb, Defense Intelligence Agency Operations. And Dr. James Rutherford, our Technical Analysis Specialist." Director Blackwood stepped forward, her expression serious but not unfriendly. "Ms. Chun, Dr. Morrison has briefed us on your discoveries. We need to examine your evidence immediately and determine the scope of what we're dealing with." Maya opened her laptop and began displaying the photographs and technical documentation she'd collected. The team gathered around the screen, and Maya found herself explaining circuit modifications and frequency analysis to people who clearly understood the implications better than she did. "These aren't random modifications," Dr. Rutherford observed, studying the images of altered circuit boards. "This is systematic conversion of standard military radios into sophisticated intelligence gathering platforms. The work is professional grade, probably performed by technicians with extensive training in American military communication systems." Marcus Webb was examining the frequency logs Maya had captured. "The transmission patterns you recorded match intelligence protocols used by foreign services, but the encryption methods are more advanced than anything we've seen before." Director Blackwood pulled up additional displays on the wall monitors. "Ms. Chun, your discovery has helped us understand something we've been investigating for 18 months. We've been tracking intelligence leaks from multiple military installations, but we couldn't identify the method being used to gather classified information." Maya watched as satellite images of Fort Brazelton appeared on the screens, overlaid with communication signal analysis that showed transmission patterns she hadn't been able to detect with her equipment. "The network is larger than you realized," Blackwood continued. "We've identified similar signal patterns at Fort Campbell, Fort Hood, and Quantico. Your espionage ring isn't just operating at one base, it's a coordinated intelligence operation, targeting multiple military installations simultaneously." The scope of what Maya had stumbled into was staggering. This wasn't just about Colonel Hendricks or Major Crawford. This was about a foreign intelligence service that had systematically infiltrated American military communications across multiple states. "How long has this been going on?" Maya asked. "Based on our analysis, at least 3 years," Webb replied. "Possibly longer. The operation was sophisticated enough to avoid detection by routine security protocols, and the intelligence being gathered was valuable enough to justify the resources required to maintain such an extensive network." Dr. Rutherford was still studying Maya's technical documentation. "Ms. Chun, the modifications you discovered required access to highly classified information about military radio specifications. Someone provided the foreign operatives with detailed technical manuals and component specifications that should have been restricted to authorized personnel only." "You're suggesting there's an American who helped design this operation," Maya said. "We're certain of it," Director Blackwood confirmed. "Foreign intelligence services are sophisticated, but they don't understand American military systems well enough to perform modifications this precise without inside assistance." Morrison had been quiet during the briefing, but now she spoke up with a question that made Maya's blood run cold. "Sarah, have you identified who might have provided the technical specifications?" Director Blackwood hesitated before answering. "We have a theory, but it's one that has serious implications for how we proceed with this investigation." She activated another display that showed personnel files and security clearance records. Maya recognized some of the names. They were all people with access to the kind of technical information that would be required to design the radio modifications. The insider isn't someone at Fort Brazelton, Blackwood explained. Based on our analysis, the technical assistance came from someone with access to the original design specifications for military communication equipment, someone who worked on the development of these systems before they were deployed to military installations. Maya studied the personnel files, trying to understand what she was seeing. Then one name caught her attention, and she felt the world shift beneath her feet. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison was listed among the personnel with access to the classified technical specifications. Maya turned slowly to look at her former professor, who was watching her with an expression of calm resignation. "You knew," Maya said quietly. "You knew because you helped design their modifications." Morrison nodded. "I provided technical consultation to help foreign operatives understand American military communication systems. But Maya, it's not what you think." Marcus Webb had moved to block the exit while Dr. Rutherford positioned himself behind Maya's chair. She realized that the rescue had been an elaborate trap, designed to bring her and her evidence to the very people who had orchestrated the espionage operation. "Professor Morrison has been working with us for 2 years," Director Blackwood explained. "She's a double agent, providing carefully controlled information to foreign intelligence while helping us track their operations." Maya's mind reeled as she tried to process this revelation. "You're saying this entire operation is some kind of authorized intelligence sting?" "Not exactly," Morrison said. "The foreign espionage network is real, and they're gathering genuine, classified information. But we've been aware of their activities and using them to feed disinformation while tracking their methods and personnel." "Then why frame me as a spy?" Maya demanded. "Why make it look like I'm part of the conspiracy?" Webb answered that question. "Because your discovery threatened to expose the entire operation prematurely. We're in the final stages of identifying the complete network, including assets we haven't located yet. If the foreign operatives realize we've been monitoring them, they'll disappear before we can arrest everyone involved." Maya felt sick as the full scope of the deception became clear. "So you're going to let me take the blame for espionage while you continue your investigation?" "No," Director Blackwood said firmly. "We're going to use your discovery to accelerate our timeline and take down the entire network. But we need your help to do it properly." Dr. Rutherford activated a new display showing the communications intercepts Maya had recorded. "Your technical analysis was more thorough than anything our people had been able to achieve. You identified modification techniques and communication protocols that we'd missed in 18 months of investigation. What exactly are you asking me to do?" Maya asked warily. Morrison leaned forward in her chair. "We want you to return to Fort Brazelton and continue your normal duties while wearing recording equipment that will capture additional evidence. The foreign operatives know you've discovered their modifications, but they don't know how much you understand about the larger operation. You want me to go back there as bait. We want you to help us gather the final pieces of evidence we need to arrest everyone involved," Blackwood corrected. "Colonel Hendricks, Major Crawford, and at least 6 other personnel at Fort Brazelton are part of the network. But there are additional operatives we haven't identified yet." Maya stood up and walked to the window overlooking the industrial complex. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the abandoned buildings. She'd started the day as a simple repair technician and now found herself in the middle of an international espionage case that involved double agents and federal task forces. "What happens if I refuse to help you?" she asked. "Then we'll be forced to proceed with incomplete intelligence," Webb said honestly. "Some of the network will escape, and they'll likely establish similar operations at other military installations. The damage to national security will continue. And if I agree to help, then we end this operation permanently and prevent future infiltrations of this type," Morrison replied. "But Maya, I won't lie to you about the risks. If the foreign operatives realize you're working with us, your life will be in serious danger. Maya turned back to face the task force. How do I know you're telling me the truth now? How do I know this isn't just another layer of deception? Director Blackwood stood up and activated a secure communication terminal. Because I'm going to show you something that will prove our legitimacy. The screen displayed a direct video link to a briefing room in the Pentagon. Maya found herself looking at a 3-star general and 2 civilians in expensive suits who radiated the kind of authority that came from the highest levels of government. Miss Chun, the general said, I'm General Patricia Sullivan, Deputy Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. The operation you've uncovered represents one of the most serious breaches of military security in decades. Task Force Blackwater has been conducting this investigation under my direct authorization. One of the civilians spoke next. I'm Deputy Director Harrison from the CIA. The Foreign Intelligence Service involved in this operation has been a high priority target for both our agencies. Your technical expertise has provided evidence that we couldn't obtain through traditional intelligence gathering methods. Maya realized she was looking at people with the authority to authorize operations at the highest levels of American intelligence. This wasn't some elaborate deception. This was a genuine federal investigation that had been running for years. What specific assistance do you need from me? Maya asked. General Sullivan answered directly. Return to Fort Brazelton tomorrow morning and resume your normal duties. The foreign operatives will likely contact you, either to recruit you into their network or to eliminate you as a threat. Either way, we'll be monitoring all communications and ready to intervene if necessary. They'll want to know how much I understand about their operation, Maya said. What should I tell them? Morrison smiled for the first time since they'd arrived at the safe house. You tell them the truth, that you're a talented engineer who discovered something far beyond your expertise, and you're terrified of the consequences. Let them think they can control you through fear or money. Director Blackwood handed Maya a small device that looked like a standard military communication earpiece. This will allow us to monitor everything that happens and provide guidance if the situation becomes dangerous. But Maya, once you walk back onto that base, you'll be completely on your own until we can make arrests. Maya took the earpiece and studied its design. It was remarkably sophisticated for something so small, probably more advanced than the communication equipment she worked on in her repair shop. When do you plan to make the arrests? She asked. Within 72 hours. Webb replied. We're coordinating with military police, FBI counterintelligence, and international partners to ensure we capture the entire network simultaneously. Maya looked around the room at the people who were asking her to risk her life to complete their investigation. 6 hours earlier, she'd been a simple repair technician who just wanted to fix broken radios. Now she was being recruited as an undercover operative in an international espionage case. But as she thought about the classified information that had been compromised and the soldiers whose lives might be at risk because of leaked operational plans, Maya realized she didn't really have a choice. All right, she said finally. I'll do it. Maya arrived at Fort Brazelton's main gate at 0700 hours, exactly when she would normally begin her shift. The military police officers processed her entry without any indication that she was wanted for questioning, which meant Task Force Blackwater had successfully managed to keep her official status clean despite the security alerts from the previous day. The small communication device hidden in her ear provided a constant, low-frequency tone that confirmed her connection to the task force monitoring station. Morrison's voice came through clearly as Maya parked in her usual spot. Remember, act naturally but stay alert. We're tracking all communications in and out of the base, so we'll know if anyone tries to contact you through official channels. Maya walked toward the communications building, passing the same security checkpoints and familiar faces she encountered every morning. The normalcy felt surreal after everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. She was now a federal operative carrying recording equipment into the heart of an active espionage operation. Her repair shop looked exactly as she'd left it, except for one crucial detail: the modified radio had been removed from her workbench. In its place was a standard requisition form indicating that the equipment had been returned to inventory for redistribution. The paperwork was signed by Major Crawford. Maya photographed the requisition form with her phone, knowing that Task Force Blackwater would analyze every detail. Then she settled into her normal routine, beginning work on the backlog of radios that had accumulated during her absence. 2 hours passed without incident. Maya repaired 3 field radios with genuine technical problems, water damage, antenna failures, and a power supply issue that required component replacement. The work felt almost therapeutic after the stress of the previous day, until her shop door opened and Colonel Hendricks entered. "Miss Chun," the colonel said, closing the door behind her. "I understand you had some technical difficulties yesterday that required you to leave the base early." Maya's heart rate spiked, but she forced herself to respond calmly. "Yes, ma'am. I was experiencing some equipment problems that I needed to resolve before continuing with my assigned repairs." Colonel Hendricks moved closer to Maya's workbench, her eyes scanning the tools and test equipment. "What kind of equipment problems?" "Frequency analyzer calibration issues," Maya lied smoothly. "I was getting inconsistent readings that could have resulted in improper repairs." "I see." Hendricks picked up one of the radios from Maya's work queue. "Ms. Chun, in your professional opinion, how difficult would it be for someone to modify a military radio to receive unauthorized frequencies?" The question was clearly a test. Maya realized that Colonel Hendricks was trying to determine how much she understood about the modifications she'd discovered. Morrison's voice whispered in her ear, "Tell her it would be extremely difficult. Make her think you don't understand the sophistication of what you found." "It would be very challenging," Maya replied. "Military radios have built-in frequency limitations and encryption protocols that would require specialized knowledge to bypass. I wouldn't know how to attempt something like that." Colonel Hendricks set down the radio and studied Maya's face. "Have you ever encountered radios that seem to have been altered from their original specifications?" "Not that I could identify," Maya said, adding a note of uncertainty to her voice. "Sometimes older equipment develops performance variations, but I've always assumed those were normal aging effects." "Miss Chun, I'm going to be direct with you. There have been concerns raised about potential security breaches in our communication systems. If you've discovered anything unusual in your repair work, it's essential that you report it immediately." Maya felt perspiration forming on her forehead despite the air conditioning. "Ma'am, if I had found anything that seemed like a security issue, I would have reported it through proper channels immediately." Colonel Hendricks nodded slowly. "I'm sure you would have. However, there are sometimes situations where well-meaning personnel accidentally become involved in security matters beyond their understanding." Morrison's voice guided Maya through her response. "Ask her what kind of situation she's referring to." "I'm not sure I understand what you mean," Maya said. "Foreign intelligence services sometimes target military personnel who have access to sensitive equipment or information," Hendricks explained. "They might approach someone like yourself with offers of money in exchange for small favors that seem harmless." Maya realized that Colonel Hendricks was trying to recruit her into the espionage network. The colonel was testing whether Maya could be turned into an asset or whether she needed to be eliminated as a threat. "Has anyone approached you with unusual requests related to your work?" Hendricks continued. "No, ma'am," Maya replied. "I work alone down here most of the time, and I rarely interact with personnel outside the normal repair requisition process." Colonel Hendricks walked to the door, then turned back to face Maya. "Miss Chun, I want you to know that you can come to me directly if anyone makes unusual requests or offers related to your work. Sometimes these situations require discretion that normal reporting channels can't provide. After Hendricks left, Maya sat down heavily in her chair. The colonel had essentially offered to protect her in exchange for cooperation with the espionage network. It was a sophisticated recruitment approach that would appeal to someone who felt overwhelmed by the security implications of what they'd discovered. Morrison's voice confirmed Maya's assessment. She's trying to bring you into the network as a controlled asset. This is good. It means they don't see you as an immediate threat. Maya resumed her repair work, but 15 minutes later her shop door opened again. This time, Major Crawford entered with a man Maya didn't recognize, a civilian in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place on a military base. "Ms. Chun," Major Crawford said, "this is Mr. Victor Petrov from the Defense Contractor Liaison Office. He's here to discuss some technical specifications with you." Maya knew immediately that Petrov was the foreign operative she'd heard on the Maya encrypted transmissions. His accent was subtle, but definitely Eastern European, and his knowledge of electronics became apparent as soon as he started asking questions. "Ms. Chun, Major Crawford tells me you're exceptionally skilled at radio repair and modification," Petrov said. "I represent a company that develops specialized communication equipment for military applications." "What kind of equipment?" Maya asked, trying to sound interested rather than terrified. Petrov opened a briefcase and removed several electronic components that Maya recognized as advanced signal processing chips. "We're developing enhanced communication capabilities for field radios. The modifications would allow expanded frequency ranges and improved encryption protocols." Morrison's voice whispered, "He's describing the exact modifications you found. Play along but ask technical questions that will reveal more about their operation." "That sounds fascinating," Maya said. "What specific frequency expansions are you targeting?" Petrov smiled approvingly. "We're interested in extending standard military radios to cover civilian emergency frequencies, air traffic control, and selected international communication bands." Maya understood that he was describing a comprehensive surveillance capability that would allow military radios to monitor virtually any communication in a given area. "How would you implement those modifications without interfering with the radio's primary military functions?" she asked. "That's where your expertise becomes valuable," Major Crawford interjected. "Mr. Petrov's company needs someone with intimate knowledge of military radio repair procedures to help develop installation protocols." Maya realized they were offering her a position as the technical specialist for their espionage operation. Instead of having to break into her shop to modify radios, they wanted to recruit her to perform the modifications directly. "What kind of compensation would be involved?" Maya asked, hoping to draw out more details about the operation. Petrov named a figure that was more than Maya's annual military salary. Additionally, there would be opportunities for international consulting work that could significantly expand your technical expertise. "International work?" Maya pressed. "Our company has contracts with military organizations in several countries," Petrov explained. "Someone with your skills could have a very lucrative career developing communication solutions for international clients." Maya understood that he was describing opportunities to work directly with foreign intelligence services. The recruitment offer was comprehensive money, career advancement, and international travel that would position her perfectly for espionage work. Morrison's voice provided guidance. "Tell them you're interested, but need time to consider the implications. We need to know more about their timeline and operational structure." "This is a very generous offer," Maya said carefully. "But working with international clients would require security clearance modifications and probably background investigations. How long would that process take?" Major Crawford and Petrov exchanged a meaningful look. "Miss Chun," Crawford said, Some of our projects operate under special authorization that streamlines the normal clearance process. We could have you start on preliminary work within days rather than months. Maya realized they were describing work that bypassed normal security protocols entirely. They had established a system for recruiting military personnel into intelligence work without proper authorization or oversight. What would the preliminary work involve? She asked. Petrov removed a tablet from his briefcase and showed Maya technical diagrams that she recognized immediately. They were detailed schematics for the radio modifications she'd discovered, complete with component specifications and installation procedures. We need someone to validate these modification procedures using actual military equipment, Petrov explained. You would receive radios that require these enhancements and document the installation process. Maya stared at the schematics, understanding that they were asking her to legitimize their espionage operation by providing technical documentation that could be used to train other operatives. These modifications are quite sophisticated, she observed. Who developed the original designs? Our engineering team includes several former military communications specialists, Major Crawford replied. People with extensive experience in American military systems. Morrison's voice confirmed what Maya suspected. They're referring to the American insider who provided the original technical assistance. Keep pushing for more specific information. I'd be interested in meeting the other team members, Maya said. It would help me understand the scope of the project better. Petrov closed his tablet and returned it to the briefcase. That can certainly be arranged as the project develops. For now, we need to know if you're interested in proceeding with the preliminary work. Maya looked between Major Crawford and Petrov, realizing that her answer would determine whether she continued as an undercover operative or became a genuine target for elimination. I'm definitely interested, she said. When would you need me to start? Tomorrow, Crawford replied immediately. We have several radios that require the modifications, and we're working under a tight timeline. After they left, Maya sat in her shop processing what had just happened. She'd been officially recruited into the espionage network, which meant she now had access to their operational procedures and timeline. But it also meant she was committed to performing actual espionage work while wearing federal recording equipment. Morrison's voice provided reassurance. You did perfectly. Now we know they're planning to accelerate their operation, which means we need to move up our arrest timeline. Maya realized that the next 24 hours would determine whether Task Force Blackwater successfully captured the entire espionage network or whether she'd end up disappearing, like so many other people who'd stumbled into situations far beyond their understanding. She was no longer just fixing broken radios. She was now an active participant in the most dangerous intelligence operation of her life. Maya arrived at her repair shop the next morning to find 6 military radios waiting on her workbench, each accompanied by detailed modification instructions that made her stomach turn. The schematics were more comprehensive than anything she'd seen before, describing alterations that would transform standard communication equipment into sophisticated intelligence gathering platforms, capable of intercepting and recording classified military transmissions across multiple frequency bands. Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece as she examined the documentation. Maya, photograph everything before you begin. We need complete records of their modification procedures for the prosecution cases. The first radio on her list was designated for the 75th Ranger Regiment, currently preparing for a classified deployment to Eastern Europe. The modifications would allow foreign operatives to monitor every aspect of the Rangers' mission planning, from logistics coordination to real-time tactical communications. Maya began the delicate process of installing the surveillance components while maintaining constant audio contact with Task Force Blackwater. Each circuit modification was documented in excruciating detail, creating evidence that would eventually be used to prosecute the entire espionage network. "This is more than just intelligence gathering," Maya whispered into her hidden microphone. "These modifications would allow real-time interception of active military operations. People are going to die because of this information." Morrison's response was grim. "We know. That's why we need to complete this operation today rather than waiting for our original timeline." 3 hours into her work, Maya's shop door opened, and Viktor Petrov entered, accompanied by a woman Maya hadn't seen before. The newcomer was tall, athletic, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that suggested extensive military or intelligence training. "Miss Chun," Petrov said, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Amanda Walsh. She's the project coordinator for our technical development program." Maya recognized the name immediately from the security access log she'd reviewed. Amanda Walsh was supposed to be the technical specialist whose security clearance had been revoked, but here she was, apparently running the technical aspects of the espionage operation. "Dr. Walsh," Maya said carefully, "I understand you have extensive experience with military communication systems." Walsh smiled coldly. "More extensive than you might imagine. I spent 12 years developing the original specifications for most of the equipment you're currently working on." Maya realized she was looking at the American insider who had provided the Foreign Intelligence Service with detailed technical knowledge about military radio systems. Walsh wasn't just collaborating with enemy agents, she was one of the primary architects of the entire operation. "How did you become involved in this project?" Maya asked, hoping to gather intelligence about the network's origins. Walsh moved closer to Maya's workbench, examining the modified radio with professional interest. "Let's just say that the U.S. military wasn't adequately compensating me for my contributions to national defense. Other organizations were more appreciative of my expertise." Petrov opened his briefcase and removed the secure tablet. "Ms. Chun, we need to discuss an acceleration of our timeline. Recent developments require us to complete the radio modifications more quickly than originally planned." Maya felt her pulse spike. "What kind of developments?" "Security concerns," Walsh replied vaguely. "There are indications that someone may have discovered our operation. We need to finish the current batch of modifications and begin extraction procedures." Morrison's voice whispered urgently in Maya's ear. "They know we're onto them. Stay calm and try to get more information about their extraction plans." "Extraction procedures?" Maya asked. Petrov, and Walsh exchanged a meaningful look. "Ms. Chun," Petrov said, "this project has always been temporary. Once we've gathered sufficient intelligence about American military communication protocols, the team will be relocating to continue our work elsewhere." Maya understood that they were describing the end phase of a long-term intelligence operation. The foreign agents had spent years infiltrating American military installations, and now they were preparing to disappear with classified information that could compromise U.S. national security for decades. "What happens to the people who've been helping with the project?" Maya asked. Walsh answered with chilling directness. "That depends on their level of cooperation and their potential value for future operations." Maya realized she was being evaluated for potential recruitment into international espionage work. If she proved useful enough, they might offer to take her with them when they left the country. If not, she would become a security liability that needed to be eliminated. "I'm definitely interested in continuing this work," Maya said, hoping to convince them of her value while buying time for task force Blackwater to intervene. Petrov seemed pleased with her response. "Excellent. We have one final test of your technical capabilities before we finalize our arrangements." He activated his tablet and showed Maya schematics for modifications that were far more complex than anything she'd seen before. These weren't just surveillance enhancements. They were active communication interception systems that could hijack encrypted military transmissions and redirect them to foreign intelligence services. These modifications would allow us to not just monitor military communications, but to actually control them, Walsh explained. We could intercept orders, modify mission parameters, or even issue false commands that would appear to come from legitimate military sources. Maya stared at the schematics, horrified by the implications. This wasn't just espionage, this was active sabotage that could result in military units receiving false orders during combat operations. How quickly do you need these modifications? Completed? She asked. Today, Petrov replied. We're implementing the final phase of our operation tonight. Morrison's voice provided urgent guidance. Maya, we're moving up the arrest timeline immediately. Keep them talking for 30 more minutes while tactical teams get into position. Maya needed to stall without arousing suspicion. These modifications are extremely complex. I'll need to review the schematics carefully to ensure I don't damage the radio's primary functions. Walsh moved behind Maya's chair, positioning herself where she could observe every aspect of the work. I'll supervise the installation personally. I designed these modifications so I can guide you through any technical difficulties. For the next 20 minutes, Maya worked through the complex circuit modifications while Walsh provided detailed technical guidance. Every word was being recorded by Task Force Blackwater, creating evidence that would definitively prove Walsh's role as the primary American collaborator in the espionage operation. Maya was installing the final components when her hidden earpiece crackled with Morrison's voice. Maya, tactical teams are in position. We need you to get clear of your shop immediately. But before Maya could respond, Walsh suddenly grabbed her arm with surprising strength. Ms. Chen, you've been wearing a communication device throughout this entire conversation. Maya's blood ran cold as she realized that Walsh had detected the hidden earpiece. The technical specialist's expertise with communication equipment had allowed her to identify the federal surveillance device. I don't know what you're talking about, Maya said, but Walsh was already reaching for Maya's ear. Petrov moved quickly to block the shop's exit while Walsh extracted the tiny communication device from Maya's ear. She examined it briefly then crushed it under her heel. Federal surveillance equipment, Walsh said grimly. Miss Chun has been working with law enforcement throughout this entire operation. Maya found herself trapped between two experienced intelligence operatives who now knew she was an undercover federal asset. The situation had gone from dangerous to potentially lethal in a matter of seconds. Petrov pulled out a cell phone and began typing rapidly. I'm alerting the extraction team. We need to implement emergency protocols immediately. Walsh grabbed Maya by the shoulders and forced her into her chair. Ms. Chun, you're going to help us understand exactly how much the federal authorities know about our operation. I don't know what you're talking about, Maya insisted. I was just trying to do the work you asked me to do. Walsh laughed coldly. Please, your technical analysis was far too sophisticated for someone who stumbled onto our modifications accidentally. You've been working with federal counterintelligence from the beginning. Maya realized that her engineering expertise had ultimately betrayed her cover. The same technical skills that had allowed her to understand the radio modifications had also revealed her as a potential federal operative. Petrov finished his communication and returned the phone to his pocket. The extraction team will be here in 15 minutes. We need to determine how to handle this situation before they arrive. Walsh was studying Maya with the calculating expression of someone evaluating a potential threat. We have two options. Either Ms. Chun comes with us and provides technical assistance to our international operations, or we eliminate her as a security risk. Maya's mind raced as she tried to think of ways to escape or signal for help. Task Force Blackwater knew her communication had been compromised, but they might not realize how immediate the danger had become. I can be valuable to your international operations, Maya said desperately. My technical skills could help you establish similar networks in other countries. Petrov seemed to consider this possibility. What specific capabilities could you provide? Maya began describing advanced radio modification techniques, hoping to convince them of her value while buying time for federal agents to arrive. She had no way of knowing whether Task Force Blackwater was already moving to rescue her, or whether she was completely on her own. Outside her shop, Maya could hear the sounds of increased activity vehicle engines, radio chatter, and what might have been footsteps moving through the corridors of the communications building. Either the extraction team was arriving, or federal agents were preparing to raid the facility. Walsh moved to the window and peered through the blinds. We have a problem. There are federal agents surrounding the building. Petrov cursed in what sounded like Russian and began gathering the modification equipment from Maya's workbench. How much time do we have? Not much, Walsh replied. They're setting up a perimeter around the entire communications complex. Maya realized that Task Force Blackwater had initiated their raid, but she was still trapped with two desperate intelligence operatives who had nothing left to lose. The next few minutes would determine whether she survived to testify about the espionage network she'd helped expose. Walsh turned back to Maya with a decision made. Ms. Chun, you're coming with us. If we can't extract cleanly, you'll serve as our insurance policy. Walsh pressed a knife against Maya's throat while Petrov gathered the most critical modification equipment into a single bag. Through the small window in her shop, Maya could see federal agents taking positions behind vehicles in the parking lot. Task Force Blackwater had arrived, but their rescue operation was complicated by the fact that she was now a hostage. Ms. Chun, Walsh said quietly, you're going to help us walk out of here. Any attempt to signal the federal agents will result in your immediate death. Petrov was checking his phone constantly, apparently coordinating with other members of the espionage network. The extraction team is compromised. Federal agents have arrested Major Crawford and Colonel Hendricks at their quarters. We're on our own. Maya felt a mixture of relief and terror. The arrests meant that Task Force Blackwater was successfully dismantling the network, but it also meant that Walsh and Petrov had nothing left to lose. Desperate intelligence operatives were exponentially more dangerous than those with escape plans. What's the backup extraction protocol? Walsh asked. Petrov showed her something on his phone screen. Emergency rendezvous at the communications tower. There's a helicopter standing by at the auxiliary landing field. Maya realized they were planning to use her as a human shield while escaping in an aircraft that was probably operated by additional foreign agents. If they reached the helicopter, she would likely disappear permanently into an international intelligence network. Walsh forced Maya toward the door while Petrov gathered the remaining equipment. Remember, Ms. Chun, your survival depends entirely on your cooperation. The federal agents outside want you alive, which gives us leverage as long as you don't do anything foolish. They moved into the corridor that led toward the buildings. Main exit. Maya could hear radio chatter echoing through the hallways as federal agents coordinated their positions. The communications building was being systematically surrounded, but the agents were being careful to avoid direct confrontation, while hostages were involved. As they approached the main lobby, Maya saw Director Blackwood's voice coming through a megaphone from outside. This is the FBI. The building is surrounded. Exit through the main entrance with your hands visible, and no one will be harmed. Walsh laughed bitterly. They always say that, don't they? But we both know that federal prison for espionage is essentially a death sentence. Petrov was studying the building's layout on his phone. There's a service exit on the north side that leads directly to the communications tower. We can use the underground cable tunnels to avoid the agents in the parking lot. Maya remembered the maintenance tunnels from her escape the previous day. The passages were narrow and would force them to move single file, which might provide an opportunity to break free from her captors. The tunnels are dangerous, Maya said, hoping to discourage them from that route. There are electrical hazards and structural problems that could be deadly. Walsh pressed the knife more firmly against Maya's throat. Miss Chun, you seem to be confusing your situation. You're not our advisor, you're our insurance policy. If the tunnels are dangerous, you'll help us navigate them safely. They moved through the building's lower level toward the service exit Petrov had identified. Maya tried to memorize every turn and landmark, hoping that Task Force Blackwater agents might be able to track their movement through the facility's security camera system. The service exit opened onto a loading dock that was currently empty. Of Federal agents. Petrov checked his phone again and gestured toward a concrete structure 50 yards away, the base of the main communications tower that rose more than 200 feet into the air. The helicopter will land at the base of the tower in 10 minutes, Petrov said. We need to be there and ready for immediate extraction. As they crossed the open ground between the building and the tower, Maya caught sight of movement in her peripheral vision. Federal agents were tracking their progress from concealed positions, maintaining visual contact while staying far enough away to avoid triggering a hostage situation. The base of the communications tower housed a small maintenance facility with its own entrance to the underground cable tunnels. Walsh forced Maya inside while Petrov secured the door behind them. The space was cramped and filled with electrical equipment that hummed with constant power. Now we wait, Walsh said, positioning herself where she could watch both Maya and the door. Maya studied her surroundings, looking for anything that might provide an escape opportunity. The maintenance facility was essentially a concrete bunker designed to protect critical communication equipment from external threats. There were no windows and only one exit, which meant she was trapped until the helicopter arrived. Petrov was monitoring multiple communication frequencies on a handheld radio. Federal agents are establishing a perimeter around the tower. They know we're here. How long until extraction? Walsh asked. 6 minutes. Maya realized that Federal agents were facing an impossible tactical situation. If they attempted to storm the maintenance facility, Walsh would kill her before they could intervene. If they allowed the helicopter to land, she would disappear into an international network that specialized in making people vanish permanently. Then Maya remembered something about the maintenance facility that might provide a solution. The communications tower's electrical systems were controlled from this room, including the high-powered transmitters that provided radio coverage for the entire base. If she could trigger an electrical overload, it might create enough chaos to escape or signal for help. Maya began moving slowly toward the main electrical panel, trying not to attract Walsh's attention. The panel controlled power distribution for the tower's communication arrays, and Maya knew from her technical training that overloading certain circuits would trigger automatic safety shutdowns. Miss Chun, Walsh said sharply, step away from that equipment. I was just trying to stay out of your way, Maya replied, but she'd managed to position herself close enough to reach the main breaker controls. Petrov was listening to something. On his radio, the helicopter is 2 minutes out. Federal agents are pulling back to avoid the rotor wash. Maya knew this was her only chance. While Walsh and Petrov were focused on the approaching aircraft, she lunged toward the electrical panel and through the main breaker switch. The maintenance facility plunged into complete darkness as every light and piece of electronic equipment shut down simultaneously. More importantly, the communications tower's transmitters went offline, which would trigger automatic emergency protocols throughout the base. Walsh cursed and tried to grab Maya in the darkness, but Maya had anticipated this and rolled away from her original position. The concrete floor was painful, but it put distance between her and the knife. Find the emergency lighting, Petrov shouted, but Maya was already moving toward where she remembered the door being located. Emergency lighting activated after 30 seconds, providing minimal illumination that cast confusing shadows throughout the facility. Maya could see Walsh searching for her while Petrov tried to restore power to the critical communication systems. The power restoration will take several minutes, Petrov said grimly. The helicopter can't wait that long. Maya realized that her sabotage had forced them to choose between restoring the tower's communication systems and maintaining their extraction timeline. Either choice would compromise their escape plan. Walsh finally spotted Maya crouched behind a bank of electrical equipment. Miss Chun, you've just made a very serious mistake. But before Walsh could reach her, the facility's door exploded inward and federal agents flooded into the space. Maya saw Director Blackwood leading the assault team, moving with tactical precision. That suggested extensive combat experience. "Drop your weapons," Blackwood shouted. "This facility is secured." Walsh still had her knife, but she was now facing 6 federal agents with automatic weapons. Petrov raised his hand slowly, apparently recognizing that resistance was futile. "Dr. Amanda Walsh," Blackwood said formally, "you're under arrest for espionage, treason, and conspiracy to commit acts of sabotage against the United States military." Walsh dropped the knife and allowed herself to be handcuffed, but her expression remained defiant. "You have no idea how much damage has already been done. This operation has been gathering intelligence for 3 years. Your military secrets are already in the hands of people who will use them against you." Petrov was also being arrested, but he seemed more resigned to his fate. "The network is larger than you understand. Arresting a few operatives won't stop what's already in motion." Maya found herself being helped to her feet by Morrison, who had entered the facility with the tactical team. "Maya, are you injured?" "I'm okay," Maya replied, though her hands were shaking from the adrenaline. "Did you get everyone?" Director Blackwood answered that question. "We've arrested 17 people across 4 military installations. The operation has been completely dismantled." As they emerged from the maintenance facility, Maya could see the scale of the federal response. FBI agents, military police, and counterintelligence personnel were processing evidence and conducting interviews throughout Fort Brazelton. Espionage network that had operated in secret for years was being systematically destroyed. Morrison walked with Maya toward a waiting vehicle. "You should know that your technical analysis was crucial to this investigation. Without your detailed documentation of the radio modifications, we never would have understood the full scope of their operation." "What happens now?" Maya asked. "Extensive debriefing, testimony for the prosecution cases, and probably a commendation." "For your service to national security," Morrison replied. "You've helped prevent what could have been one of the most damaging intelligence breaches in American military history." Maya looked back at the communications tower, where technicians were already working to restore the system she'd shut down. During her escape, her simple job fixing broken radios had led to the exposure of an international espionage network that threatened the security of multiple military installations. 3 months later, Maya found herself testifying before a closed session of the Senate Intelligence Committee. The prosecution of the espionage network had revealed the full extent of the damage. Classified deployment schedules, communication protocols, and operational plans had been compromised across multiple military branches. Dr. Amanda Walsh received a life sentence for treason. Viktor Petrov and his associates were exchanged for American intelligence assets in a prisoner swap that remained classified. Colonel Hendricks and Major Crawford faced court-martial proceedings that would likely result in decades of military imprisonment. Maya returned to her repair shop at Fort Brazelton, but her role had fundamentally changed. She now worked directly with counterintelligence teams to identify potential security vulnerabilities in military communication systems. Her technical expertise and experience with espionage methods made her invaluable for preventing future infiltrations. The modified radios were displayed in a classified museum that documented major intelligence operations. Maya's detailed technical analysis became part of the training curriculum for federal agents specializing in technological espionage cases. Director Blackwood visited Maya 6 months after the arrests. "Miss Chun, I wanted to personally thank you for your service during this operation. Your courage and technical expertise saved countless American lives." Maya was working on a new radio when Blackwood arrived, a standard repair job that reminded her of simpler times when broken equipment was just broken equipment. "Director Blackwood," Maya said, "I still can't believe how close they came to completely compromising our military communications. If I hadn't noticed those frequency anomalies." "But you did notice them," Blackwood replied. "And you had the intelligence and courage to act on what you discovered. That's what made the difference." Maya thought about the chain of events that had led from a routine repair job to an international counterintelligence operation. Her technical curiosity and attention to detail had exposed a conspiracy that could have compromised American national security for decades. "Have there been other operations like this?" Maya asked. Blackwood's expression became serious. "Ms. Chun, what you discovered was unusual in its scope and sophistication, but it wasn't unique. Foreign intelligence services are constantly probing for weaknesses in our defense systems. People like you, dedicated professionals, who notice when something isn't right, are our best defense against those threats." Maya nodded and returned to her work. She was still fixing broken radios, but now she understood that every repair might be protecting something far more important than communication equipment. She was protecting the security of everyone who depended on military communication systems to keep them safe. The radio on her workbench crackled to life as she completed the final connection. This time, the only signal it received was the clear, encrypted communication of American forces operating exactly as intended: secure, protected, and free from foreign surveillance. Maya Chun had started as someone who simply fixed broken things. She'd become someone who protected the systems that kept her country safe. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.